I throw a question about what is modeling more, the software.
Yeah, it's the domain itself, the business domain itself, or the communication flow that exists between teams. I think that the product owners has a great deal of impact when actually managing this kind of situations, because if you are giving the business domain by drops, you say, okay, we will start with this, but then when you have everything more or less like working in a product, but you have to add this. What we were mentioning before, the example with the laws, that when you have software developed that has to be compliant with some laws, and when you have everything ready, then someone comes at you and tells you, well, it's not compliant to this law that I hadn't tell you anything about that before, but you have to take that into account. Okay, then you have a problem. And I think that this should be a responsibility of the product owner or whoever's in charge of that team to give like a whole vision of what is to be developed. Okay, more or less. For the developers to ask questions, like and for everyone to be consistent, and we have all the information available before starting to write a single line of code. Okay, I think that helps a lot coming up with a good domain model. Okay, because of course we should adapt to change. Of course, life will never stay the same, so our application should evolve as well. But that is this does not mean that we don't have to have all the information available when we start the project in order to come up with a good domain model, in my view.
So now that we are entering into more like technical things, do you think that event storming it's a good exercise for these kind of things? Doing the event storming together with developers. So imagine that you have a team that doesn't know a lot the context, the domain, and so on.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely something that should happen before we start to write. Okay, it's a very good exercise. I don't think if it should be like the first thing we do, especially with new products. Okay, I think that I would prefer to involve the dev team in the product discovery process. Okay, and then of course have the event storming meeting. Okay, because I think that there's a lot of context that you can provide before jumping straight to event storming. Okay, and I think that it helps a lot bringing developers before starting a project to actually have them study what they want, what they're aiming at, what is the current workflow if you're developing something for an existing company and you have a workflow. I'm completely pro bringing them in and asking questions on site, etc., etc. This happened to me actually. We are giving consultancy to the shelves to a big hospital in Barcelona. Okay, and the hospital is very strong in pregnancy and women health. Okay, so they have a top-notch assisted pregnancy. They freeze embryos, etc., etc. And we have to develop software to actually support all these circuits. And it helps us. It helped a lot when we had to develop a new thing to actually bring people in the lab and see all the steps that we are going. What is when a doctor comes to our office and speaks about this, and that, to actually see what is every term that they're referring to ask about that, because then the developer can ask questions to define if something is mutable or not mutable, etc., etc. So they gain a lot of context and knowledge by doing this kind of exercises. So it's something that should happen before, and then we could jump to an event storming to define the model, the domain, in my view, I think.
I have some experience with event storming, and I pretty much enjoy it more when it's not exactly something from scratch, especially in those cases that you were commenting, no, like oh yeah, well, this is what we should be doing. This is what we are actually doing. And this is when you start to find those moments when the product people comes or people from whatever business function comes to that exercise, and they are like, so what we were all the time saying and referring to in this way, now you want to tell me that you were doing it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
We are like, oh yes. And this is when the technical team find out like, oh yeah, so all this part of the process is not even passing through the system. And this has happened to me quite often, lastly, in which I go there to have conversations with the final users and to observe how they work. And I found out all the workarounds around the system just because the system is not giving them all what they expect or not with the velocity they need. So there is a lot of trespassing data through Excels and processing outside and emails, flows that you just don't see in your system, but in even storming, you kind of visualize it. And it's very interesting when it's already there. Otherwise, it has a lot of risk to become a big exercise of Jackney. No, you aren't going to need this, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting because can you have, so in the end, you can have a lot of things surrounding your software that you are not into considering to put inside your software that is affecting how your software is behaving and how you build it. That's interesting. So because I had something in mind, a question like, okay, can something that it won't be never in your application impact how you are developing your application? And I was thinking in this kind of examples when you have a workflow, for example, and you are only developing the software for the last step. And maybe all the previous steps, even if they are not in your software, will affect the way that you are modeling and developing your software. So it's interesting. It's more like a reflection or speaking out loud, not like.
We have a very obvious example in Glovo, right? In my team that I can speak publicly. So and probably this also happened to people working in hospitality, in booking domain. Also happened to me the same thing. Is when, for example, the restaurants send you the menus, the catalogs, right? They have all kind of methods to do that, right? Usually an email with some PDF or some image. The same for booking offer when you have different rooms, in the hotel, somewhere in Albacete. So you send it like this, and then someone needs to take that and process it and pass it through the system. But there is not like a very specialized pipeline when you are dealing with the long tail of providers, right? So there is a lot of processing happening before even it hits the system. So whatever observability you may put there to capture events in the front end, whatever sophistication you could have, you still miss one very important part of the process.
Yeah, because I was thinking now that I'm starting a project with 2 other friends of mine, and it's interesting because before I knew anything about the domain, I entered there like, oh, I want to check what you are doing. And I was trying to understand what they were doing, and they had like a lot of things. But once that I discovered how was the domain and what they wanted to do, it was like, okay, this is here and it's not useful, and this was not useful neither. And it was only because they were not technical and they were doing like a workflow because it was working for them and it was super complex. And once that you know the domain, you can simplify also the workflow. And this leads also that the workflow of working, even if it's not included in your software, is modeling your solution a lot.
Now, there are small details that it's not, there are sometimes it's not even about the workflow. It's even about the data itself. For instance, I think like 22 years ago, that did a lot of time, or 20 years ago, with my first company, we developed a product for Catalan television, okay, that was a real-time video analysis tool. And we integrated with many different providers, and there are some university groups doing stuff to actually support the project. One of these groups developed a critical part of the project for the video cataloger, and it was crashing all the time. And it was something like when you treat video, especially now everyone knows it, but back in the days, it was in the time where we were switching from like videotapes to actual like video files, right? So we're getting crashes, and now like this API is crashing. I don't know why. And basically, the main problem we have is that we had to specify like a time format, which was like hours, minutes, seconds, and then 2 digits more. When you treat video, these 2 digits more are frames. They go from 1 to 30. So if you don't tell that, and the guys developing that part, they think that they have 2 digits, you put cents of a second. But what happens if you provide more than 25 to a video file? That, of course, you don't have that frame, so it crashes. So they spent like 3 weeks debugging. They were not like the brightest team in the world either. Okay, but it's something that could have like be solved in a 1 minute call. Like, guys, it's when you treat video, it's like you have hours, minutes, seconds, frames, and that's what you will get. Okay.
That is the history of every bug in the history of the world. Some developer didn't know about some small business rule or technical rule or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. But I guess because if these guys that well, they actually were sitting in the Polytechnic University in Barcelona, so they were at the beginning of the diagonal. They had gone to TV3, which is 1.5 kilometers away. Okay, when you go to a TV station and you, especially in analog, everything you see is time codes. Like all the videos have like a time code where you can actually like see the time code itself. So you will see that they're speaking about frames, right? And maybe like with one visit, they could have noticed like, this is like playing, and it never exceeds like 30. You know, it goes like the cent of a second go from 1 to 30, and that's it. So, and as you say, Alejandro, it has happened all the time, and will keep happening all the time to a lot of people, right? But I think that once you have made this mistake, it is also your responsibility to try to address it, right? So with a good kickoff and providing the right information, and as a team leader, not as a product owner, but also as a team leader, to provide the right environment so people feel free to ask. Okay, and is not shy to actually speak with the client or make the right questions or ask for something, some validation, etc., etc. I think it helps a lot.
So do you think that, for example, now that I'm hearing these experiences and so on, do you think that DDD is a silver bullet? I mean, imagine a perfect DDD. Because
that is
in
such a good
theory,
question. Come on, there is no silver bullet, Angel. Come on.
It's a starter.
Yeah, but imagine, in theory, with DDD, what you are doing is modeling exactly the knowledge of the domain experts.
But so your question is cheating, because if you say, imagine the perfect DDD, and I can say, imagine the perfect, put anything you want in here, everything works, right? So
the only thing the only thing I can say about domain-driven design is that we, in the attempt of simplifying the language, we introduce all kind of complicated language, like ubiquitous language. Who the hell thinks that this is simplifying anything? But without joking, I think that this is one of the problems of domain-driven design. It's extremely complex to understand it for many people who is not into the topic.
I think that domain-driven design brings many things that I won't say that they didn't exist before. Okay, because when we talk about aggregate, for instance, which I find a very useful concept, but it's something that we were using before, even if we didn't call them aggregates. Okay. And the idea of having a ubiquitous language is not a bad idea, but the main problem you have is that if you have two parts, like the business and development, and you try to bring some ubiquitous language so they can meet in the middle, what happens is that none of them is comfortable, right? I think that it is more efficient to actually, if we have the business and the development, so provide the right context, so the development team knows exactly what we're talking about in here.
Well, the uncomfortable truth is that the business also don't know, and that probably there is no such a thing of a perfect domain model, right? I mean, all models are wrong, right? Some of them are useful depending on what are you assigning as a trade-off for usefulness in that particular case, and usually you are paying something by doing it one way or another. No?
Now I would change.
That's the thing. It's a totally trade-off.
Yeah, I would change wrong by improvable.
I will say that more than improvable or wrong, it's the concept of trade-off. At the end of the day, you need to really pay one thing or the other, and you need to choose your pain, right? So your pain is in terms of scalability, or your pain is in terms of having a coupling where you don't want to have a coupling, or to have too much complexity by dividing every single thing. So the typical discussion between monolith versus microservice, right? If we go coarse grain or too specific, all those are trade-offs, and you always pay it one way or another.
Ramon, you bring a very old discussion and debate that I have in different companies. So we have established this kind of situation where you have a model and you have some kind of representation of the model and two different people with mindsets that needs to agree that that is the thing that they want. Yeah, and you have the business people, and then you have like three different schools of thought. The ones that think that developers can never understand the business, and it's easier for business people to understand what developers are doing. And these are the guys that are setting you like no code tools, don't worry, no coding, no language.
With a lot of success, by the way.
Yes, and on the other side, you have the people that think that business people can never understand developers, and developers should be the one going like to the business for everything. And I was in that school until I heard Dave Snowden saying why this was not happening and what was the average developer looks like, and how this is kind of difficult to happen at the scale that this needs to happen. And then the third school is the DDD school. It's like, okay, we need some kind of representation in the middle, and to bring the people from one side and bring the people from the other side and try to make it agree on this. But for my test, it looks a lot like a technical tool. So we need to sell something to normal guys, to not say business, that they can buy, they want this, and then we have to agree that that is a good tool to do domain representation.
Actually, I will say that you are the first product owner that I see talking about domain-driven design ever, beside of John Cutler, maybe. But,
Yeah, well, that is
and coming from technical background, no?
Yeah. So. No, but I accept that I have an edge in here, in the sense that I can speak developer like one-to-one with any team, in the sense that even if I don't understand some concept, it's not that I know all, but it's very easy to me to actually understand when they explain to me, right? So yeah, there are like two different ways to become a product owner, coming from marketing side, okay, coming from being a bad developer, which is my case. And I think that you have advantages and you have pros and cons, like depending when you come. In that case, of course, it's very easy for me to understand DDD. And when we model domains, it's very easy for me to help my development teams understand the business model if they don't, right? Because I can translate back, in the sense that we can speak about relationships in the model, we can speak about what should be an aggregate, what should not, we can speak about events, services, etc., etc. So maybe that's why I think that most of the time I try, at least at the beginning, not to meet in the middle, okay, but to try to, because at the end of the day, what we want for in DDD is to model the business, right? And it's something that will be done by us, the development teams. So I try not to meet in the middle. So let's go for the business domain and do DDD like on that. And then if I have to give up something because it's something that I might not know, or this is my daughter, by the way, telling hello to the call, and or something like that, then we can speak about trade-offs. But I try to go for broke and model the whole thing without meeting in the middle. But maybe I don't think that I'm the only product owner that comes with a technical background. So it should not be such a weird case, right?
But what it really I haven't observed almost never is that domain-driven design crosses the technical the people with technical background, even if they're product owners. I never seen someone coming from, I don't know, UI or directly from marketing or these places talking about domain-driven design at all and being totally unaware. So maybe we could have high-level discussions around bounded context and talking more about strategic domain-driven design across the techies and the managers and everything. But when it comes to product, we need to really start to do this translation of all the things that we were talking about, what is a bounded context, what is not, to something that they could actually grasp. And then I find myself not having really the toolbox and the language, the common language to discuss around that. And now it comes more interesting things like team topologies, for example, when you combine domain-driven with how you make the teams, and you even have to have this conversation with HR. And then I'm totally lost. How I will tell about cognitive load and these kind of things to HR, right? I'm lost. So there is not this kind of the promise of domain-driven design is to have a common toolbox, a common language to discuss around this. I still find that it's not common at all. I mean, it's maybe common towards the techies.
And even sometimes it's also difficult for technical people have that common language because sometimes they refer to the same concept with different names also. Depending
Indeed.
Sometimes on the company and the story of the company. For example, something that happened to us is that we come from being two different companies 3 years ago. And of course, now we are the same team and we are the same company, but still we have some concepts that we speak a little bit different and are the same, in fact, but we use a different name and other people use a different name. And sometimes it's funny because you can know if one person in the team is being new in the company or not, depending on the language that they are using for referring to some concepts. So if you hear somebody saying something, you will say, oh, this one is a dinosaur inside the company, or no, this is a rookie. Yeah.
I agree with that, Angel, and I also agree with Daniel that it's very difficult for non-tech people to speak about DDD like itself. The farther you will get is to speak somewhere around the ubiquitous language and try to speak on that terms about what they're doing. But when it comes to the model, to the actual model, it's something that you almost never discuss directly with a client or with an end user or something like that. It's something that you have to explain at the end of the day using the business words, like inverse translating the ubiquitous language to the language they understand.
Which makes it stop to be ubiquitous, right?
And how can you when you are modeling something, how can you agree some trade-offs with the bounded context and these kind of things? Because sometimes it's like, okay, we need this. Now,
well, at the end, it's boxes and arrows.
Putting this inside the monolith is faster, but
boxes, arrows, and pointing bullet points of a scope. And this is responsibility. And the harder thing, for example, when you need to explain that, for example, for one concept, imagine that we have the concept of a store, which is kind of common concept in different industries. So for one bounded context, I know that it means something. For the other bounded context, I know that it means something else. And you just take care of the differences in domain-driven. This is what the promise of domain-driven, right? To explain this, to the business, like, oh yeah, this team is going to handle all this financial part of the store, and this team is going to handle the operational part of the store, they got lost. It's like, okay, but who handles the store? Where is the single responsibility? No, we don't like the single responsibility because that means that cognitive love, coupling, cohesion, and you start to explain these things, and then you're lost, and you totally lost that battle. So there is where probably it's the problem. So sometimes I even have a bit of white lies, no, like, no, don't worry, everything is handled. Then internally I have the division, right?
So we started with if developers should know the business domain, and we solved the software development problems of the world. We're saying, yes, it's about communication.
And how bad are we at communicating? No?
Yes, yes. I think I would be without a job if people were communicating more successfully between them. So I'm happy that.
Which is why no code doesn't work, right? Because you still need to communicate to someone how to no code. Or the robots, right? Will never replace you just because somebody needs to tell the robot what to do.
The other day, somebody raised that topic in a common Slack channel that we have done, Daniel Vasquez and myself. Somebody asking, will in the future artificial intelligence and no code things replace developers and so on? It's like, well, I think that the complexity is understanding the business, not the code itself.
If they can drive consensus across many different people with different interests and with different views of reality, I buy that robot, right? I still don't know any human who can do it.
That's why we have jobs.
All right, we have a couple of minutes left, so I think it would be great if we jump into last quick questions or last thoughts you may have.
Yeah, just one quick thing. I want to apologize on behalf of Fran, which was here in the beginning, that he has have to leave because he had to attend his baby. So he asked me to apologize on his behalf, and he will watch the video later. So don't want him to tell me anything if he doesn't see that.
It's a father on call.
Don't worry, first things first, of course. And by the way, I will read the article that you just shared. Communication is still the primary contributor to project failure.
Yeah, it's something that, especially in IT companies, because the communication chain, sometimes there are a lot of concepts and details lost in the middle. Okay, but I think it's a key thing to keep in mind when starting new projects, and it should be one responsibility of the product manager or the project manager, whoever is more or less on top of everything, okay, to make sure that everyone knows and understands fairly well the concepts and the objective we're talking about.
I will say that I don't even try to get to that point, right? I find out that there is a bit of a fantasy that there are somewhere the clear requirements laying, waiting for being discovered, and they just don't exist. I mean, I always prefer to think in terms of bets, right? And we bet on something, we believe, and we have an hypothesis that this is going to be useful and this is going to have an outcome. Then we try to be as clear as possible, right? But I found out a lot of frustration in the development teams, thinking that we are just not working enough to find those precious requirements that are very clearly defined, and then to discover that actually there is no such a thing.
No, but I don't think that they're incompatible concepts, in the sense that it's not that you have to prepare everything to some extent that should be like perfect in your ideal world, okay? But it's something like it's a continuous improvement process, in the sense that every task that you or every epic or every feature or every day, what you have to do, at least that thing should be like clear. And if it's not clear, you should also be proactive, communicating, hey, this is or I'm in a crossroad in here, where do you go? You know, how do we iterate? But at the end of the day, it's a process of communicating.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I thought it was that that's background, because now you can put that background. Do you remember that guy from BBC?
Yeah.
Entering the kid, and then you can put that background there. And when I was just tricked, I was like, oh, yeah, the kid. Then I was, no, it's the BBC one.
The thing is, I try to trust my children, and well, the worst one was that guy on TV that had Pornhub.
Oh.
So that is even funnier than the BBC kid. But anyway.
Yeah, this is a good strategy for making everybody more human.
Yeah.
When you are speaking with stakeholders or people that are far away from your team, it's like, okay,
exactly. Yeah,
we are the same. Well, so
all right, guys. I think time's up. We would like to thank you all for participating today. I think it was really interesting. Have a great week, great Christmas as well, and see you soon. On behalf of Apiumhub, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
It has been a pleasure as well.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.